The land did not change with the war. It did not mourn, it did not rejoice. It held the blood, took the weight of the fallen, fed the frost, and then without asking it waited for seed and for silence. Before the army came, the camp was already alive. Scouts chose the ground river to one side, marsh to the other, a woodland near enough to fell, but far enough not to burn. The blacksmith lit his forge. The woodcutters worked by rhythm, not command. The healers walked the hedges, hands deep in leaf and root, plantain, meadowsweet, moss, marshwort. The cooks stirred broth that would not last the day, and there were women mending, washing, grinding. Children gathered eggs, tugged goats, watched fires. It was a camp built not just for war, but for the men who would need to survive it. They did not march in as heroes. They came like men who had walked too far, slept too little, and left too much behind. Some carried shields, others carried bread. A few had fought before, most had not. These were the feared. The butcher's boy, the farmer, the monk who no longer prayed. They came not for conquest, but because someone had to stand the line. A priest walked among them, not in gold, but in wool. He spoke no promise of victory, only that their names would not be lost in silence. They trained with sticks and wooden swords. They bled early, so they might bleed less later. When the ealdorman spoke, they listened. Not because they knew war, but because they were afraid not to. It was not glorious. The battle ended, but the screaming did not. Some screamed for brothers, some screamed with what was left of a leg, some only breathed and then didn't. The field was not a place for songs. It was mud and torn cloth, blood in the frost, limbs where they shouldn't be. The healers moved fast. They packed wounds with moss, tied splints with belt leather, and prayed the rot would wait. The horses, those that lived, trembled beside carts. And then came the carts. Wrapped in cloaks, the dead were laid gently, if there was time. Some were known, most were not. Where the ground was soft, they buried. Where it was not, the fires were lit. And long after the warriors were gone, the fires still burned. They did not build statues, they built fires. The stories were not written, they were spoken. At dusk, in kitchens beside pigs, where little ones listened while pretending not to. The tale was not of victory, but of who came home and who didn't. They told it with bread passed down the table, with tunics mended from the cloaks of the fallen. A grandfather pointed to the hill there. That's where they stood, that's where we waited. And a child said nothing but would remember that line for 50 winters. They called it Ethandun, but perhaps it was never Eddington. Perhaps it was here all along, on Fenny Hill, where the fen rises to meet the sky, where the blacksmith struck iron beneath a bent tree, where the goats scattered before the march, where Egbert stone stood not as myth but as marker. The scribes heard Eddington. The land whispered something else. Axe and brick, not ink, not Latin, but memory and place, not a crown, not a king, just a hill, a stone, and the shadow of men who held the line. Peace did not arrive with fanfare. It did not ride in on a white horse. It came in smoke from the last cooking fire, in hands that stitched what was torn, in seeds pushed into blood-heavy soil. The fields did not care who won. They only grew. Homes were mended, children were born, the pigs returned to their pens. Peace was not declared, it was lived, quietly, fully, and by those who remained. History remembers the kings. It marks the dates of battles. It names the victors, but it forgets the aftermath. It forgets the woman who boiled the bandages, the boy who buried the dead, the old man who fed 3 others and went hungry. It forgets that peace must be sown, like a torn cloak, one stitch at a time. This is not the story of crowns. This is the story of hands, of firelight, of those who stayed. Written and illustrated by Sharon J. Narration by the Professor. Based on the book Saxon Aftermath. Original artwork by the author, with thanks to Ari Designs.